And we're back. This week we have two comic picks for you, back to some old school KGW comic pick of the week stuff. The first one is Manor Black from Dark Horse Comics, and the second one is of course Powers of X from Marvel. I was so excited for this comic and I have a lot to say. So without further ado, let's talk comics. I'm sweaty, oh so sweaty. We're going to start with Manor Black because this is the far less confusing of the two comics that I read this week. And also I picked this up because it has a little endorsement over here from Patton Oswald, who I am a big fan of. And who am I to tell Patton Oswald that I'm not interested in reading the comic that he had nice things to say about? Nobody is the answer. And it was really good. It was the first issue of this comic, and so it did a lot of introducing. It brought you into this world where magic exists and ghosts exist, and it's about a runaway mage, and you learn why she's on the run. Her family was killed in an accident, definitely of a magical nature. So not only are you contending with the magic, but also you have that old school sort of sheriff in a small town investigating something spooky. He doesn't know it's quite spooky yet, but he's gonna learn the depths of the spooky. And so not only do we have this young mage that you're introduced to, but we also have an old sorcerer magic guy who has to pass on the torch of magic to one of his sons. And of course that's all very spooky, and that coupled with the council of old should-be dead people and also ghosts that are all in touch with this magical world. And so it was really interesting, and I think that if you're interested in that sort of stuff, that sort of dark magic, sort of family lineage type thing, that you'd be really interested in a comic like this. I really enjoyed it, and I think that I will pick up the second one to keep reading it because I think they did a good job introducing you into the world, but then making you wonder what's going to make it so different. There's maybe perhaps blood magic, dark magic, I don't know, but that's right up my street, honestly. I like that kind of stuff, and adult Harry Potter magic, that kind of stuff like that. So Manor Black was really good. The art style in it was really beautiful too. It had a watercolor-esque sort of look to it, and I say that as somebody who doesn't really know that much about art, but I know what looks nice, and to me this looked nice. So Manor Black, check it out if you're interested in magic stuff. And now on to Powers of 10. House of X came out swinging last week. That's Jonathan Hickman's revamp on everything you know about X-Men history, and this just takes it to a whole flaccid. And this just takes it to a whole nother level. This comic packed so much information and mutant history into one comic. I had almost a hard time wrapping my head around it, but I think it's because I'm kind of dumb and not to do anything with the wonderful, wonderful writing of Jonathan Hickman in this comic. I'm so excited to read more. Now this comic is sort of a wild ride into both the past, present, and future. It was a lot, so come with me on this ride. Now we look into 4 different eras. X to the 0 power, which if y'all remember from math is 1, means year 1, where we get to see Xavier right at the moment as he decides that he's gonna make the school for gifted youngsters, which is super cool. It leaves us on a little bit of a cliffhanger, so I think we'll be revisiting year 1. He meets somebody at a carnival-ish thing that he apparently doesn't remember, but that person knows him. I think it's gonna get a little dramatic. So then it skips ahead to year 10, X to the 1st power, which is where we currently are in House of X. So we see Mystique and Toad coming through the portal from House of X. If you remember, they went and they stole some technology stuff and they handed over, and they show up in what is called the House of M, and Magneto is there. And I am so trained to think that everybody who writes Magneto is gonna write him as some terrible, jaded bad guy. So I thought there was gonna be some sort of big baddie reveal here, but there wasn't. And I was really happy for that because I love Magneto. He's like my favorite X-Men character. Xavier also shows up, and it is made abundantly clear that as he's trying to build this utopia of sorts, mutant utopia on Krakoa, that in order to create this utopia, everybody owes something, which is also ominous. And then from there, it jumps 100 years. So from year 1, 100 years later, the mutant population has dwindled down again. That's because they're in a war against the humans and the Sentinels who have band together, and then the mutants over here, of course. And to make a long and complicated story kind of short, I'm gonna try, stay with me, this is very inside baseball. If you haven't read the comic, this isn't gonna make a lot of sense to you, so pick up the comic at your local comic book store, maybe Floating World Comics, located at 400 Northwest Cooch Street. That's where I get all my comics. Everyone there is so nice and so helpful. I really appreciate them, so go tell them I said hi. Anyways, okay, back to it. The humans and the Sentinels and the mutants, they're fighting a war. And on both sides, they were breeding mutants. Now, the humans and the Sentinels were breeding mutants called hounds, which they were trying to breed to fight mutant kind. Okay, then the mutants, well, they went through this period where all of their like mutant leaders had either disappeared or died. It's a little ambiguous, probably purposely. And Mr. Sinister started breeding mutants. I don't know if you've read anything about Mr. Sinister, but his name is Mr. Sinister. So you can kind of guess how that went. Not well. Basically by his 4th generation of mutant breeding, those mutants had a defectiveness and they murdered 40% of the mutant kind. So not only are they in this war, but like then that happens, mutants are hurting. But the hounds that the humans and the Sentinels made, they turned on the humans and Sentinels and joined mutant kind. Really what I'm getting at is that there's a big bloody war right now, and there's only about 10,000 mutants left, and they're all sort of scattered in different factions in space. But we do see some characters that you're used to seeing, some form of Rasputin, some form of Nightcrawler, old-looking Logan, Wolverine, and Magneto, who never ages, and a couple other people that you will undoubtedly recognize. And it sounds like Xavier is still alive because Logan references the old man. So I have to assume that Xavier has somehow lived that long, which is fine. However, the humans and the Sentinels, all run by and worshiping Nimrod, yep, he's back, they capture a mutant. And instead of just straight up killing that mutant, he puts her into a little weird jar like you do some sort of lamb with 2 heads or something. And that's important because when you flash again further into the future, year 1000 from year 1, when Xavier was just thinking about the School for Gifted Youngsters, we have some sort of alien, machine, mutant, human. It's not abundantly clear who they are, but Nimrod is still there. But Nimrod seems to have been sort of recalibrated to be less murder time. Looks less like big, bulky alien robot, and now he's like a tiny, sleek drone. But it only matters that we have specimen mutants because that undisclosed being is trying to rescue them. So it appears that maybe the tides have turned again and they're looking to be more kind to mutants, perhaps. I don't know, but it definitely shows sort of the ebbs and flows of how war and otherness, viewing others, sort of works, as we can see mirrored in our own history. Sad, but true. Now, we don't get a huge look into that very distant future, that 1,000 years later, but we do see that being talking about what a waste of time that human sentinel and mutant kind war was. So are the mutants all extinct, or did they thrive, or are they on their way back up? Do the sentinels still exist, and what are humans like? I think we're gonna get a look into, of course, all of those time periods, but I'm very excited to return back to House of X. I know this was like a lot. When I was reading it, it was like a lot. And there's this really cool thing that Jonathan Hickman has been doing, writing in, where there's like sort of every so often there's like this page that looks kind of blah, blah, blah. There's this page that kind of looks like a government file of some description where it explains some of these sort of mutant missions or mutant history pieces, which is really interesting. You have sort of a breakdown of the DNA of some of the mutants that were made and stuff like that. So it's all really interesting and it really helps push the story along. But remember, this is sort of breaking down and rebuilding the whole history of X-Men, which is a lot. It's a lot. So I'm really thankful to Susana Polo. I'm really sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. She writes for Polygon. She's the comics editor at Polygon, and she wrote this really comprehensive article about Powers of 10, which really helped me sort of understand what was going on, and I really appreciate her. And at the end, she said, X-Men are a lot. You are correct. I agree with that greatly. She also posits that maybe in House of X, you see like mutants crawling out of these weird egg pods, like you see like what looks like Cyclops or something crawling out, I'm not sure, towards Xavier, who's standing there with his big weird head thing. And she posits that maybe those are genetic copies of our X-Men. So I think that's really interesting and could have interesting implications to the future. So I'm really excited to see where this is headed. Are you reading House of X and Powers of 10? I'm really, really excited about where this is going. I love the X-Men. It's my favorite Marvel franchise. Let me know if you're reading it in the comments below, or if you're just hard passing, which I understand. It's not for everybody, but it's been really good so far. This, of course, is a little bit different than other comics. It's coming out week to week to week to week. So you get Powers of X, and, or you get House of X, Powers of 10, House of X, and at the back of each comic there's a little bit of a glossary letting you know what's coming out when, so you can keep up, and you can put that stuff in your pull box like I do at Floating World. So that's all I have for you this week. We read Manor Black and Powers of 10. I almost said Powers of X. And Powers of 10. And I'll see you guys next week, same-ish time, same place. And until then, this has been KGW's Comic Pick of the Week.